So we're going to continue on with chapter 14, talking about the Civil War and social, political, economic impacts of the war. I want to start by talking about Lincoln's response to secession. So as we talked about last time, Lincoln was not even sworn in, and states had already seceded, a constitution had already been written, a provisional president had already been elected. So he's not even president. He can't do much prior to his presidency. But once he becomes president, he has a response, right? And one of the things that he makes it very clear is that he believes that secession is impractical. He doesn't think it's going to work, that the United States cannot divide itself into. And he promises that there's not going to be any conflict unless the conflict is provoked by the South, right? And I want you to also remember that the Europeans at this time are waiting and seeing, right? And the South is going to really rely on or hope for European intervention on their behalf. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But ultimately, they would love disunion. They would love disunion. If the United States divided, it would be weaker. If the United States was fighting against itself, it would give them more opportunities to have influence and take advantage of, of the resources of the West, recolonizing, reconquest of the Western Hemisphere. That sort of stuff is on their mind. Also, trade relationships. Right. So the Europeans would love disunion, but they are waiting to see what happens. So Mr. McCarty talked about Fort Sumter in the battle in Charleston, South Carolina, that it was one of the few remaining federal forts in the South. And Lincoln found himself in a lose-lose position because by the time he's president, this fort is running low on supplies. And so they're asking for resupplies. The South would see that as an act of aggression. So Lincoln sees himself in a lose-lose position. If he doesn't do anything, he's basically going to surrender the fort to the Southerners. If he does reinforce them, give them more weapons to protect themselves, it's going to be viewed as an act of war and probably trigger the Civil War. So what he does is he takes a middle-of-the-road approach and he resupplies them with provisions, but he doesn't reinforce. He doesn't send a bunch of new weapons and war materials, but he does send food, blankets, clothes, that sort of stuff. That's his plan. Well, the South sees that as reinforcement, as an act of war. And so they will fire on and conquer Fort Sumter in a day and a half. And again, not considered a major battle, not even really considered the first big battle of the Civil War. It's really, like McCarty said, this is really just kind of the first shots fired of the Civil War. And the South fires them right on the North. People watch. If you ever go to Charleston, South Carolina, you can take a little ferry boat out to Fort Sumter. It's on an island there, and it was kind of guarding the harbor. It had been used in the Revolutionary War, but this is the first fighting of the war, and the Confederates conquer Fort Sumter, and we start to see a Southern advantage in the Civil War, and that is they are fighting a defensive war. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to conquer anybody. All they have to do is defend their territory, and that's how they're going to win. They're not interested in spreading the Confederacy to the north. Okay, so the Northern response, this kind of solidifies the North around the Union cause, right? And so you're going to hear chants and read headlines that say things like "Remember Fort Sumter" and "Save the Union." And there have been a lot of folks who hadn't really taken it seriously, say, let the South go. And now they're going to start realizing that they need to take this seriously. So enlistment numbers are way up. But Lincoln is going to be very careful not to alienate the border states. Remember, there are some slave states like Maryland, for example, who had not seceded yet, but was wary because they were a slave state who didn't want to lose their slaves. So Lincoln makes it very clear that his goal is to preserve the Union with or without slavery. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the economy. And as we know, cotton had been a very important crop in the South and in the United States. And the South was actually counting on foreign countries to get involved and to help on their behalf, largely because of what they thought was their economic weight. But it didn't happen. A couple of reasons why not. Number one, even though the ruling classes in Europe had sympathy and wanted to support the South, had economic ties and economic interests in supporting the South, and again, the destabilization of America was going to be good for the elite in Europe, the working masses favored the North, right? And Uncle Tom's Cabin was a big part of this. People had read it. They were not okay with slavery, right? Remember, these are European countries that had already gotten rid of slavery. And so the slavery issue for them outweighed the economic benefits that they weren't going to see much of anyway. So the masses did not support joining the war to support the South. And so the elites kind of had to acquiesce to the masses. There was also a pre-war cotton surplus, right, that had driven the prices of cotton down and had made cotton available, so they weren't as dependent on the South. And they were getting crops and grains from the northern farms, and so they were not needing the South as much as the South had thought they would need them. But there were attempts to kind of put feelers out and try and help. The Trent Affair and the Alabama Civil War, a Southern Civil War warship. The Trent Affair was the diplomats, Southern Confederate diplomats, who were pulled off of a British ship, the Trent. They were going to Britain to negotiate some diplomacy and try and work out some sort of agreements to get British support, and they were taken off of the ship, and that really upset the British. Almost led to getting more support for British getting involved in the war. But ultimately, European countries will see that it's not in their interest to support the South and to get involved at all. Okay. Some more economic stuff. So the post-war economy and kind of the during-war economy as well. The northern economy is better suited to a war. The industrial economy is better suited to war than an agrarian economy. The northern economy is going to boom after the Civil War. We're going to see the first American millionaires. There's a lot of people making a lot of money off of this war. And we're going to see that as the war is going on, we're continuing to develop in the North labor-saving machinery that's going to position the North to be even wealthier after the war. We're going to see population growth in the Northern territories. There's going to be people pulled by oil and gold, and there's going to be people who are leaving to go to the Western territories because they don't want to be subject to the draft. And so the Southern economy is going to be the flip side of that coin, right? The Southern economy had not diversified. They were totally reliant on agriculture. King Cotton was dead, right? They did not have that same power that they had when cotton was at its peak. Saw a lot of poverty in the Southern economy, poor transportation networks. And then, you heard about Sherman's March. It's going to destroy what they did have. So just a terrible economy in the South in the post-Civil War era. They had also, because they had separated, allowed the Northern government to kind of rule the country. So the Northern government was getting all of the types of supportive legislation that they had wanted to improve and progress industry and industrial interests in the North, right? So we can imagine, and I want you to think about what the American economy is going to look like between 1865, which marks the end of the war, and 1900. And that's going to be our first unit of study in History 18 when we get back. It's going to be an era known as the Gilded Age. And this is the real industrial revolution in America. All right, so we'll pick up in the next lecture with some legal and social issues that came up during this. Thanks for watching.